This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
You know, I was watching the Miami Dolphins versus Buffalo Bills game. And then it got to halftime and they announced that the Cleveland Browns will be playing the Houston Texans at 4:30 on NBC on Wild Card Weekend. And while I have known the path that this team has been on for weeks, months, while I have believed in this team's potential for weeks and months, it still hadn't truly set into me yet that the Cleveland Browns are about to play a playoff game again for the first time since 2020. Now, in Browns timeline, that's not that far, right? Like, it's the same coaching staff, it's the same GM, a lot of the same guys on the roster. But in people time, like 4 years, like some people done graduated college in between Browns playoffs runs. Like, think about that. It's still a good amount of time. And I think back to where I was in 2020. I wasn't even live streaming the watch party experience for the games yet. I didn't have this space to do the show in and not nearly as developed in doing this as I am now. And it's one of those things where you work and you hope and you watch and you worry every week that something's going to happen. And then you finally sit back one day, look up, and see that thing happening, and it finally becomes real to you. The Cleveland Browns play a playoff game this week. They play a playoff game this week. And guess what else set in as I watched that Buffalo in Miami game? Because, I'm used to going into this being like, well, I don't want to play this team. And, this team presents certain problems to me. And I was watching this Miami in this Buffalo game. And I was like, wow, there's two great teams going at it. And I don't care which one the Browns could get the opportunity to play if they beat the Texans. Because one, the Browns have their hands full with the Houston Texans. It's a good football team. The record is not really representative of who they are because they lost C.J. Stroud for a few weeks and lost some games that they might have won. This is a team that could be the 2 seed, that could be the 3 seed, but fell to the 4 seed. They're the polar opposite of the Jacksonville Jaguars team that a lot of people were hoping to play, because the Jacksonville Jaguars were a shell of their record, right? If they would have gotten to 10-7 and won the division, they were a shell of that record. They weren't even close to being that team at this point in the season. They were barely a functional football team. But the Houston Texans are the exact opposite, and that's why this went the way it went, right? That's why Houston is in the playoffs and Jacksonville is not, because because Houston is actually a good football team. They're actually a playoff football team. And yes, I know the Browns had some success in Houston, playing Houston, but it is really something else when you try to play a team at home for the second time. So Browns have their hands full for sure. It's going to be a tough matchup versus the Houston Texans, but I think it's a matchup that if the Browns play a clean football game in, they play well on both sides of the ball, they're more than equipped to win. And I was watching the Miami Dolphins play. I'm like, hey, if you have to play the Miami Dolphins, yes, they get rid of the ball quickly. Yes, they have a ton of speed and rerun a ton of man. Yes, they do some of the things that bug us, like run the ball up the middle or do these toss sweep plays. And I think if I'm just looking at it from a pure a pure mismatch, not a mismatch, from a pure, this team does stuff structurally on the offensive side of the ball that would bother this defense, regardless of who's running those plays, Miami would be at the top of that list. They do a lot of the stuff that the Browns have struggled against, the end arounds, the wide zone toss plays, spreading guys out laterally, that kind of stuff, the vertical stretch stuff, the get rid of the ball quick, deep shot stuff like that the Browns struggle with. They do that well. But I also think that our defensive line can get enough pressure to disrupt them like we've seen so many other teams do. And I think the Browns can score on that defense. So while they do present some problems like any other team that you're going to play in the playoffs, I don't think that they present so many problems that the Browns can't beat them. Then I was looking at Buffalo. And Buffalo's a good football team. They're physical. They can run the ball a little bit. But Josh Allen, man, he's a load, right? He's going to make some plays. He's going to be really hard to tackle. He's going to be really difficult to get down. It's going to be a game that's won on the offensive and defensive lines. And that Bills defensive line, it's streaky. For sure, it's a streaky defensive line, but in moments it can be serviceable. The secondary is a little bit more questionable, but they do make some plays. They saw the play they made at the end of that game. They're a good football team, but I think the Browns can score on them, and I think the Browns can stop them defensively. I think we have the physical freaks to match up with Josh Allen, mainly Myles Garrett, right? Like if there's one guy who can run and tackle Josh Allen, it's him. We have the linebackers that can disrupt him, the corners that can match up with those wide receivers. And while they're a good football team playing good football and they present problems like any good football team would, I'm sitting there and I'm watching them and I'm thinking, you could take them. Not you would beat them 9 times out of 10. That's not how the playoffs work. But hey, if things go right, you play a good football game, you play clean, you can definitely beat them. Now look at Kansas City. We've had this thought about Kansas City, right? They have Pat Mahomes, and that's the best thing that they have going for them. Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And I know a lot of people are counting them out, but I just would not assume that Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce are going to disappear in the playoffs. I think that they're going to probably be pretty good in the playoffs. But the Browns have Myles Garrett, and they have some really good safeties, some really good corners to throw at Travis Kelce, and some really good corners to throw at these wide receivers that haven't been great. And that Browns pass rush, they get Pat Mahomes moving a little bit. They don't have the game breakers in the scramble game at the receiver position to make the Browns pay like they used to a couple years ago. So I feel good about that matchup. Offensively, it would be tough. They have a great defense there. But I think that they can figure out something to work there. The defense plays at its highest level. And then with Baltimore, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We've beaten Baltimore in Baltimore before. Now, again, it's tough to beat a team on the road 2 times. But this is a tough Browns team. And yeah, Baltimore presents problems like any other team. They run the ball well. Lamar Jackson's a menace. When Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are working at their highest level, which they might have Mark Andrews back, they're trouble. And now he has some wide receivers and some competent pass scheming to go on top of that. But I do believe the Browns are one of the few teams that are athletically equipped to be able to handle a lot of stuff that the Baltimore Ravens do. And they have, I wouldn't say they have the kryptonite, but they have answers to some of the stuff. Like JOK is a unique answer to Lamar Jackson. Myles Garrett is a unique answer to Lamar Jackson because you have to keep tight ends in or you have to commit to just putting 2 on him. They have enough stuff there that kind of stresses out the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns are an AFC North football team. They're built to beat teams like the Baltimore Ravens. Same thing with the Baltimore Ravens. They're built to beat teams like the Browns. So these are 2 teams designed to beat each other, trying to play each other. Who knows who wins that one, right? Division battles are always toss-ups. And it's usually going to be the case. So you feel good about your chances there. And then anybody coming out the NFC, you feel good about your chances there. You've already beaten San Francisco with PJ Walker at quarterback. Now I get it. It's a different San Francisco team, but this is also a different Browns offense than the one that San Francisco played. So yes, they might score more points than they did in that original game against Cleveland, but the Browns might also score more points than they did in that original game in Cleveland. So, those 2 different teams, I feel good about that. The Eagles, I mean, like at this point, I don't know if the Eagles deserve to be in this conversation because they have been very, very sad the last few weeks, but let's just assume that they're in this conversation. The same thing applies to any other team. Like the Browns have a good defensive line. They have be able to get pressure on Jalen Hurts. I think they're going to be able to do their thing. And then offensively, I think that they can move the ball against the Eagles. And then there's Dallas, and I feel similarly about Dallas that I feel about San Francisco. I think the Browns can run with them at the very least, and they could beat them. There's no team in the NFL that's currently playing, so what, 14 teams alive, that I feel like the Browns absolutely cannot beat. That's not something I felt in 2020. In 2020, I felt like the Browns could beat the Steelers. I was not 100% sure if the Browns really had a chance to beat the Chiefs. I wasn't 100% sure if the Browns really had a chance to beat the Buffalo Bills. I for sure wasn't 100% sure if the Browns had a chance to beat the Baltimore Ravens. The only reason I thought they might have a chance is because they lost both games in the regular season and got swept by the Ravens in 2020. And I felt like, hey, you're not going to lose 3 times in a row. But other than that superstition, there wasn't anything to make me believe that they could have won that game. And then let alone beat Tom Brady and everything else. Like, I thought the Browns could win the one game that they won. And I really didn't think that they had a chance against any of these other teams. This year is different. This Browns team can beat anybody they go up against. Now, part of it is how good Joe Flacco has been playing, and Joe Flacco's been playing well, and he's been a boost to this offense. And when your defense is as elite as this, that's awesome. But it mainly goes back to what I was about to refer to, the defense. The defense is why you believe. In 2020, they didn't have a great defense. So it mattered that Baker Mayfield was the quarterback. And no disrespect to Baker, he's about to go to a playoff run. He might win a playoff game because, again, I don't feel that great about the Eagles right now. But the defense wasn't good enough to where it didn't matter that Baker Mayfield was the quarterback. What I mean by this is when you played against the Chiefs, at some point, it started to matter that Pat was the quarterback. Even when Pat wasn't in there, it started to matter because that whole second half of that game, you couldn't move the ball. If you would have played the Buffalo Bills, that defense was not good enough to where it didn't matter that Baker was your quarterback. Same thing. That's why you lost to the Ravens both times, right? Baker played well in both of those. Well, in one of those Ravens games, I know he played well. The first one was the first game of the season. He didn't play that well. But in that second Ravens game, Baker played well on Monday Night Football. But the defense wasn't good enough to make it not matter that Baker Mayfield was out there. That defense was not terrible, but they had their issues, right? Andrew Sadeo, all of this stuff. This were the original Joe Woods concerns that we had with this team. So it mattered that Baker Mayfield was the quarterback of that team. Joe Flacco, he was turning the ball over at a higher rate than Baker was that year. But you can argue making more top-level throws than Baker was that year. The Browns defense puts him in a position to where it kind of does not matter. Like, all you need Joe Flacco to do is do his job, be serviceable at the end of the day. If he's better than that, awesome. We're gonna win by a significant margin. But if he's just doing his job, that's enough. It does not matter. Even when you're playing against an elite quarterback, it doesn't come down to that. Now, that's not the truth with every good defense, right? If you have a good defense, it still matters if your quarterback's good. But I'm talking about an elite defense, a defense that comes around maybe once every other year. And that's what the Browns have. They have an elite defense. And the reason why the Browns can win with 4 quarterbacks is obvious. The defense makes it so it just matters less who's at quarterback. They've beaten elite teams. At no point during the season can you confidently tell me the Browns have had elite quarterback play. They beat the 49ers, an elite football team. PJ Walker was the quarterback. The defense was so good it didn't matter that PJ Walker was a quarterback. They beat the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Deshaun was a part of that. Huge part. 14-14, yes. But do we really, did we think Deshaun was elite? We thought Deshaun was on his way to being much better than he had been. But nobody was saying Deshaun Watson was playing elite football in that stretch. Nobody was saying that. Even the most positive of Deshaun Watson people were not saying that. So, again, You're going up against an elite quarterback in Lamar Jackson, an MVP candidate, the best team in the NFL, according to record, the 1 seed at M&T Bank Stadium. You were able to beat them not because you had the better quarterback, but because your defense is so good, it didn't matter that you didn't have the better quarterback, because the defense could bring Lamar Jackson down to that level. We can go down the list of teams we've played where they've had a better quarterback. It did not matter. That's what an elite defense does. I said this in a video a few months ago. An elite defense is the closest thing you can have to getting the same margin of error an elite quarterback affords you. The reason you want an elite quarterback is because a lot can go wrong when you have an elite quarterback and you can still win that football game. Same thing's true with an elite defense. The first, 2 wins Joe Flacco got for this team, he threw 3 interceptions in both of those games, or had like 3 turnovers in both of those games. He had like 6 or 7 turnovers in 2 games. Won both of them. You know why? Because the defense afforded him a huge margin of error, that he could turn the ball over that much and it didn't put the score out of reach, so that when he turned it on, he can get the game back. The defense keeps the margin of error wide. The defense is going to be, if is going to be what makes it so that, hey, let's be real. CJ Stroud's probably a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. But that's not going to be what matters, right? No matter where you go in the playoffs, you're probably playing a team that has a quarterback that's going to be playing at a better level than Joe Flacco. And there's no disrespect to Joe Flacco. It's just a testament to how good these quarterbacks are. If you play Buffalo, Josh Allen is better. If you play Baltimore, Lamar Jackson is better. If you play Kansas City, Pat Mahomes is better. If you play Dallas, Dak is better. All of these things are true. But unlike 2020, where that started to matter because the defense wasn't good enough, this year, if your defense plays at the level that it's been playing at all year, it won't. And that's why I look at all these teams, and that's why we look at all these teams and we go, hey, we can beat them. We can beat them. Hey, look, we're not saying it's going to be a cakewalk. We're going to walk in and win the game, but we are saying, no, we have a good enough chance to beat you, right? Texans, it's going to be a tough battle for sure. You don't play well, you're not going to win against a team like that. It's a really good football team. You got your hands full. It's a playoff game. You can beat them. Same thing with everybody else you play. And the fun thing about it is that you're not only in this rare position where you feel like you could beat everything in front of you, every team in front of you, you're also in this rare position as a fan where you're still playing with house money. Like if you lose this year, next year looks really promising. So it's not like this devastating, oh, we lost our chance. This was our one shot at it. This is a great roster. This is a great team that's been assembled, and they have an opportunity to do something great this year. And if they can maintain this level of play, they have an opportunity to do something great for a lot of years. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.